I will focus on nature-based solutions and SDGs. I think SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, is a very important concept, and it is basically all the big companies and national states are following it. So I would like to show the link between SDGs and MBS. And Claudia will speak more about EU policies with a focus on EU urban agenda, and she will show you some local examples of the policies. So why do we need good policies, and what challenges are we trying to solve? I think if you look on the map of the Europe, it's quite obvious that most of the habitat is degraded. It's of a very bad quality, and you can hardly find a place where you have a really, a lot of forest, a lot of habitat where different species can thrive. I picked this picture from Hambach Forest. Does anyone know this forest, maybe? Yeah. So it's a forest in Germany. Of course, there's a lot of things going on, but there you can see really the fight between environmentalists and owners of the mine, and it also nicely shows that even if you have a bigger patch of forest in a country, then it's not really connected to other green places. It's really surrounded by agriculture, and this is of course a problem for different species to move from one place to another. This leads to loss of biodiversity, of course, and for example, amphibians such as frogs, they suffer a lot because the water quality is very poor. We're losing wetlands. That's another reason. Urban species such as some birds and insects are also pushed from urban areas to more peripheral areas. And I like also the example of big carnivores and omnivores such as brown bear lynx and wolves, because they're also losing a lot of habitat, and that they have been banished from most of the countries. I have a question. Is there anyone who ever seen a bear or a wolf or a lynx in the wild? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, 6. Okay. Okay. Where it was, in which country, if I can ask? If you can just say the country.
Finland.
Finland, Italy.
USA.
Okay. Canada. Yeah. So it's mostly linked. You can mostly see these animals, of course, in Central and Eastern Europe or in Canada or US. So I think this is the big issue that Europe is facing. The other issues that we have is that, the climate change is also, we need to take it into account, because our urban environment is getting unhealthy for people to live. Paris got to 42 degrees Celsius this year. I think July was the hottest month ever recorded, if I'm not mistaken. And some other cities are suffering from flooding events, cloudbursts, such as Copenhagen and other cities, which we need to address. And nature-based solutions could definitely be the answer to this problem. Then we have another level of thinking about the impact. It's not only the natural environment, but it's also human health and well-being that is at stake. So there are many people that suffer from different illnesses, and there are many mental disorders, and it's because of lack of green spaces in cities. There is a direct link, and we know it. There's a lot of research indicating the link between being exposed to nature and our mental well-being, and this of course can be mitigated by if you do a lot of physical activities, or if you visit parks often. There was indeed a very interesting study. It's very recent. So scientists from the University of Vermont, they did a study. They studied and analyzed tweets of different people. They analyzed 4,600 tweets, and they found out that people are happier in parks, but also the parks which have a lot of vegetation, they impact your mood even more than that. So this has certain implications for urban planning and public health sector. And the question is what kind of policies we have on the international level. I listed few of international frameworks that deal with these issues. Of course, we have CBD, we have Sendai Framework SDGs. So CBD is an international convention from 1993, so it's pretty old, but it really works with the concept of ecosystem services, and what is interesting, it also identifies the biggest threat for biodiversity, which is habitat degradation and reduction of quality of habitat. Sendai Framework is, of course, is a different focus. It's a 15-year non-binding agreement, which is focused on disaster risk reduction. One of the targets of Sendai Framework is to mitigate or reduce risks to critical infrastructure, and you can achieve it by implementing nature-based solutions. There are many examples, such as mangroves to protect coastal areas, or different kinds of vegetation that can prevent landslides, which is a technique really used in many developing countries, but also in Switzerland, where I come from, where I live currently. Then we have sustainable development goals, and I think this is the most complex call for action on the international level, which I would like to elaborate more on. So CBD and Sendai Framework are basically part of SDGs, because SDGs is basically trying to target all different areas of life. And to achieve these goals, we recognize that we need to transform the cities, we need to transform our society and the relationship to nature, and this is the entry point for nature-based solutions. So I have a question for you, it's just to make you active after lunch. So we have 17 SDGs and we have 169 targets, which measure how closely we are to meet SDGs, and we have 1 to 3 indicators per each target. And my question is, how many SDGs and how many SDG targets do you think we can catalyze by nature-based solutions? If I can ask you to maybe speak to the person that is next to you for 3 minutes to think about the number of SDGs that could be catalyzed by nature-based solutions, and ideally the number of targets as well. Okay, So maybe that was enough time. So can I get a few numbers from you? Maybe who would like to elaborate on that? Can I ask here? What do you think? Yeah, they're all interlinked, that's true. But if you would have to say, you know, a number from 1 to 17? You think 17, okay.
What was the question?
How many SDGs could be catalyzed by nature-based solutions? At least, it's a little bit tricky question because it's of course all interlinked, but it's a good for thinking process, you know, what the linkage. Any other guess?
Oh,
17.
Or maybe the answer is which one cannot be.
There's also a good question, yeah. So which one do you think cannot be linked to MBS?
I don't know, maybe 4, 5 should not be the main target.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, indirectly, it depends. You mean directly or indirectly?
Yeah. The result is where I say it's at least, so it can be you can always say it's 17, but it is actually at least 12 SDGs and only, which I was surprised, 41 targets. But this is a direct link to the targets, and I think it's indirect linked to SDGs. So, you know, it's just for thinking process, but it's interesting to see that 59% of SDGs could be basically met if we use nature-based solutions, and 20% of all the targets. So, yeah. In the next slides, I would like to zoom in on the few SDGs and show you the link to nature-based solutions, which I think will be more explicit. Okay, so we have SDG 15, which is life on land. And one of the targets is to ensure the conservation of different ecosystems in line with obligation under international agreements. I will always take an example of the highlighted target and as an indicator, so you know what I'm talking about. And the indicator is proportion of important sites covered by protected area status. So as you can see, MBS can be any kind of ecosystem, so it is location specific. I picked two protected areas that I know personally. One is Tatra National Park from Slovakia, which is by national legislation, it is a national park. But it also belongs to Natura 2000 network, which is the largest network of protected areas in the world. So it belongs here. The same for Kokorzynsko Kokorzynsko protected landscape area, which is also in Natura 2000 network. And the idea here is that the more networks of protected areas we have, these areas can function better and provide ecosystem services that we desperately need to meet SDGs. So basically the idea is that we should increase the number of protected areas in the landscape to protect nature in its complexity. Then we have target 13, which is climate action, and it says that by 2030 we should establish and sustainably manage protected marine and coastal ecosystems to avoid the significant diverse impact and to strengthen the resilience. As an indicator, we have ecosystem-based approach which should be used, and I've chosen mangrove forests as an MBS that can be applied. I really like the example from the Seychelles Islands. They came up with a national strategy and action plan, which is very much in favor of environment. And they also are in initiative which is called Mangroves for the Future, which is led by IUCN. And the objective is to establish new mangrove forests in the Seychelles Islands, but also to protect existing mangroves, because they can significantly increase the resilience of the coast and provide very important habitat for local fish population, for local population of lizards and insects. So what is also interesting is they look at investing options into mangroves. For the sustainability of project this is key, of course. Then we have SDG 11, and that is about sustainable cities and communities. And one of the targets is to provide safe, inclusive, and accessible green public spaces for people, which of course can be measured by how many urban parks you have in your city, and that is measured by the proportion of parks in city. So the more parks you have, of course, the closer you are to meet this SDG. Open public spaces are very important, of course, but I think it's important to stress that it's not only about having green spaces in cities, but it's to have spaces that could be utilized by people. I know many green spaces which are just shrubs and different kinds of vegetation, and no one can really use them. But I think it's important to design places where people really want to go. They can do different activities there. They can also do jogging, whatever. They can walk, but they can also socialize. So there's maybe a small cafe, a small bar where people can enjoy themselves. That's also part of it, of course. And this is directly linked to human health and well-being, to the issue that I mentioned in the beginning. And the last SDG I want to zoom in is SDG 6, which is about improving quality of water, and you can measure it by proportion of bodies of water with a good ambient water quality. This service can of course be delivered by different kinds of plants, usually forest or wetlands, which use weak bed vegetation, because they're really great at purifying the water. And the example is, I like this example from France. Does anyone know Veolia company? Actually, it's a private company which is doing business. It provides drinking water. And this company in France, they had to basically close the operation because the water they were getting from the environment was polluted with different kinds of pollutants, but mainly nitrates. And in order to open it again, they had to achieve that the raw water coming into the plant had to actually have less than 50 milligrams per liter of nitrates. And they achieved it in a way that they constructed such an infiltration lagoon, which you can call constructed wetland. And they purified the water, and they achieved basically these results, so they could maintain the operation. So it's very important for business. So many businesses are implementing nature-based solutions, so they can comply with regulation. On the EU level, we have many great strategies and directives that try to increase the uptake of nature-based solutions. Some of them are very effective. Strategies are more kind of a non-binding conceptual documents that encourage member states to act, whereas directives are more they require a certain level of action from every state that have to be transposed to national legislation. But together they create a really good set of instruments that can support implementation of nature-based solutions. So these are the main ones. Do you miss any important instrument from your experience? Or are these all important instruments that you are also familiar with? Okay, yeah.
There's the Marine Strategy Framework Directive as well, which is for marine and coastal waters.
Exactly, yeah. Any other instrument?
The Waste Framework Directive has an impact, but it's maybe indirect.
So which one?
Waste Framework.
Oh, waste framework, yeah.
Maybe the green public procurement,
Yeah, but would it fall here? Into the,
something for the green in the business.
yeah. It's a strategy document. Yeah. Well, it's interesting to see that all of those different frameworks started to pick in early 2000s. Yeah, so before it was nothing really happening in the policy, but since 2000 we can see explosion of different policy documents on the EU level. So this is a good thing, I suppose. But the problem is that even though the member states and EU policy instruments explicitly acknowledge nature-based related concepts, they rarely contain any measurable or quantitative targets for the deployment of nature-based solutions. So we don't really measure these things. So most of the actions are voluntary, or they define no actions. So I guess what can change in the future is that we really have some measurable targets in these policy documents. There was a very interesting study done by Naturation Project, which is one of Horizon 2020 projects, and I like it very much because it looked at different EU policy documents, and they look at what kind of interventions are these documents basically encouraging the member states, and they found out that in 40% of all entries, no action is it's not defined what we should do actually. In the rest of the actions are that we should maintain and manage existing spaces, and we should also focus on restoration, so of the quality of nature-based solutions. But very minimal part is dedicated to creation of new blue and green spaces, which I think is key if we want to deliver on SDGs. So I wanted to show you this. These are like two gaps in EU policies that could be changed in the future. Yeah, and I think that's all from my side. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Before you said there was no quantifiable targets for NBS
Yep.
in many of the policies. What would a quantifiable target look like?
That's a good question. I think it would be on the individual member state level. So maybe even on a city level. That is important to say. I think it doesn't make sense to make these targets on like a EU level, right? But there are quite interesting targets. For example, the city of Copenhagen, they have a target that they want to increase the percentage of the canopy of trees by 2025, if I'm not mistaken, to 20%. So they're really working on it. They have this green roof legislation, so every flat roof has to be green if it's flat or the angle is less than 30%. So I think there are many interesting policies on the local level that can help us to achieve it. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, maybe if you have questions you can always ask. But now I will hand over to Claudia.